Welcome to the Beat by Beat podcast with Armani Exchange. I'm Emerald, I'm a DJ and a presenter. And each episode, I'll bring you a different musical guest. We'll talk about their talent and their musical journey.
All I wanted to be was a DJ. When I was like 17, 18, I was going mad about it. Because I was not doing well at school, the only route for me was the army. Everyone else went home for summer. I stayed in the house and I just locked myself in my room and just got back into mixing, basically. So I'd spent that whole summer learning every week a new mix, every week new mix. It was a real hustle. It was taking records to shops by hand. It wasn't a case of it's going so well, I can quit my job. It was like, I've got to quit my job because my boss wants me to stop DJing.
Championing the coming together between people, genders and cultures. Armani Exchange's values have reflected the electronic music space since the brand's inception, evoking the idea of connection and unity. Exchange immediately connects different kinds of people, united by a shared passion for dance. Welcoming my first guest of the podcast, the wonderful Archie Hamilton.
Hello.
Hi Archie, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How's your morning been so far?
Good, very good. Nice and quiet and peaceful. We've just been sort of tidying up the studio, making it look nice for everybody.
What was it like before? Was it in a bit of a state? It looks
not
lovely
too
right now.
bad. It's basically I share it with my cousin, and he uses it for he makes like sound for movies and adverts and stuff like that, and he works like long hours, and so sometimes I come in and there's like piles of plates and coffee mugs and stuff like that, so just giving it a bit of a tidy.
Well, it looks lovely. It looks very cosy, and it's nice to see you in situ as well. It's nice to see you in context of you in your recording studio. So let's start with talking about your story and bring it way back to the beginning. Can you tell us about where you were at, about that time when you first discovered electronic music?
I was very young when I discovered it, really. I grew up in South Wales, and I guess it was my sort of early teens, and I got into it via, weirdly, my mum and my auntie were really into were ravers, basically, and they it was around the time when Human Traffic came out, the movie, and then there was that, and then I don't know, I feel like there was an era where there was like movies like Blade and all these films that had these like electronic music soundtracks, and that sort of piqued my interest, let's say. Now, growing up in South Wales, where in the situation I was in, there was not a lot going on with regards to clubs and things like that to go to. So I was a religious reader of Mix Mag and DJ Mag and all that type of stuff, and watching like Ibiza Uncovered and that, like all this sort of learning about it. But obviously, I was too young to go to clubs, and and the area I lived in, there was nothing anywhere going on. So when I was young, my mum and my auntie used to take me and my cousin, who I share the studio with, to sort of raves and free parties and festivals and stuff like that. So I kind of got into it then, but at the same time, where it's your parents' music, it's not the coolest music in the world. And so I was more into like Oasis and Britpop and that kind of stuff, right? And so I don't know, we always had these tape packs in the car, like jungle tape packs, acid house tape packs, Mrs. Wood and all this type of stuff. And I was driving around Camden yesterday, and one of the tracks from Blaze, if you should need a friend, or I'll be your friend, I can't remember the name of the track, came on, and it just brought back so many memories, because that was one of the anthems back then of that sort of tape pack era. But then it took to going to London, and I actually snuck into Fabric when I was 17, and went to, it's a Friday night, so it was a drum and bass night. And that was like the most intimidating, exciting, and all of those things experience that I'd ever had up till that point. And that was like, it put it into context and into reality. And I just was totally hooked after that. And I remember going back to where I lived at that time and going to HMV and being like, I knew DJ Hype because he was playing that night, and I was like, have you got any DJ Hype CDs? And they had all these Fabric Live CDs, so I started collecting them and got into that kind of sound. I actually then went to a Saturday night I'd never been to a Saturday night, and I thought, oh, you know, I just hadn't really got my head around house music at that point, and walked in, and it was just that again was like, wow, this is a totally different energy, totally different experience.
Saturday night was Players' Night, right?
That was a Friday.
That was my night. Players' Night was my night.
That was your night, yeah. And it was my night, and then suddenly I heard house music in that room on that sound system. I was just like, and that was me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about school. Let's talk about school and how you went to Oxford Brookes. So let's talk about your time at Oxford Brookes. Did the nights out in the city and did the people you meet impact any of the music that you were making at the time or the music that you were listening to?
Well, it's a funny one. I went to Oxford Brookes. I studied marketing and weirdly German because I could totally flunk my A-levels. I'm good at languages. And so I managed to scrape by enough grades with German to get in to do German and marketing, right? 1 year into my degree, I've dropped out of the German degree. I carried on with the marketing, but this was 2005. Facebook wasn't even a thing. So that degree then became almost totally defunct, right? Within about 2 or 3 years after having graduated, but I didn't know that at the time. In my second year, when we moved out of our halls of residence and into a house, one Christmas I got some turntables. I'd had them before when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, but when I was at school, I basically was going. All I wanted to be was a DJ. When I was like 17, 18, I was going mad about it. Even younger, maybe 15, and I just remember getting a real slap down by one of the teachers there. He was just like, you're an idiot, and blah, blah, blah. And because I was not doing well at school, the only route for me was the army, right? So I was going to join the parachute regiment. I got to uni and I thought, you know what? I don't want to do that. I want to pick up the DJing again. So I got myself some decks. And in the second year, everyone else went home for summer. I stayed in the house and I just locked myself in my room and just got back into mixing basically. With regards to the city, there were a few bits going on. I'm not going to lie and say it was the most inspiring city I've ever lived in with regards to, clubbing, but there were some great nights there. My first sort of gig out was in Oxford. So I've got a lot to thank for it. And also, the people, my friends there, we all kind of grew up together listening to this music for like that 3-year period, and all became like totally committed clubbers and ravers. And so, I mean, as much as I would say it's not the most inspiring city, if it wasn't for that, I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
You mentioned your first gig out, so the first time you played out was around this same time. Can you tell us about that? Because I don't remember my first gig. It's so hard to remember, and I want to hear about that memory. I
was thinking back to it the other day, actually. It was a party called Sex on the Beat, and it was around the time of like dirty electro. There was some great nights, some incredible music, like nasty dirty sex music and stuff like that at the Quay and the Cross and all that King's Cross Goods Yard area with some amazing music. Yeah, it was like an electro night, and I was playing. I couldn't even tell you what the tracks were. It was like Trent Moller and stuff like that. But I remember it really well. I was so nervous, but funnily enough, within about 2 or 3 tracks, I was quite comfortable, and I really enjoyed it. And I just remember thinking, because I'd spent that whole summer learning, and I was just recording like every week new mix. It was obviously burning CD era, and I got the gig because I went around hustling and giving CDs out. And I think I pretty much played exactly the same set that I gave on the CD, because I don't know, I was just obviously just super nervous. But yeah, it was one of them where you're just like, after that you're like, I've really got the bug for this.
Well done for remembering it so well. I'm going to work on remembering mine. Let's talk about Moscow Records. Moscow Records launched back in 2009. Can you tell us about the birth of Moscow Records, how it really ended up happening?
So I started it with a friend of mine, and the reason it's called Moscow Records is because he's of Russian descent, basically. We actually worked on a label prior to that called Further Project Recordings. Basically, we were sort of learning to make music. I'd spent as much time in my bedroom at university on, I can't remember what software I was using, but learning to produce. I graduated and I went to Point Blank and I learned, and I did the Logic and Ableton courses there. And I basically was making music. I mean, looking back on it now, it's terrible. But we weren't getting replies from any of our demo email requests. You know, we were writing to all these hot labels that we wanted to release on, but no one was even listening because, you know, who were we? So we just thought, why don't we start something ourselves? We went to, we basically pressed up the first release on just on a white label. And we went round shops. We went to Black Market Records, to Phonica, and people said, "What's the label called?" And they listened to it, they liked it, and they said, "You know, what's the label called?" And we basically we wanted to call it Temper, Temper. And they were like, "You're from Temper?" And we suddenly thought, "Oh my God, it's TMP." You know, there's a massively famous dubstep label called Temper with an A. So we were like, just give us 1 minute. Went outside and we were like, right, what are we going to call this label? And he was like, well, my granddad, his granddad had basically left him a little bit of cash, which was what we used to press the first release. So we thought, well, why don't we just make a little homage to him? It was also around the same time as like, there was a label called like Oslo Records, which we loved. And so it just kind of made sense. And then later down the line, the sub-label Moss, or the sister label I should say, again we're in a situation where we wanted to create a slightly different sound and we needed to come up with a name, and it just flowed off the tongue, Moss Co. Yes, so those early days, it was a real hustle. It was taking records to shops by hand and giving them on sale or return. So, you know, you either sell them and we get the money, or if they don't sell them, they return them to us. And fortunately, they all sold out. And actually, we then joined with a distributor for the second and third releases, and they didn't do as well. And music was definitely better than the first release. But I think that hustle on the first, and having all the shops go, you know, respecting the fact that you're grafting, you're out there, and you're doing it, that really worked in our favour. And then I guess the first couple of years were really nice. And then basically, it was when the first major vinyl market crash came, when Beatport really started to blow up. People started to use Tractor and move away from playing records, and so we basically had to make a decision. We always wanted to be a vinyl label, but we were forced into a situation where, I mean, was it the music that wasn't selling the records? Who knows? But we weren't selling as many units as we wanted to. We were actually beginning to lose money. And so we became a digital label for a couple of years. I think we even had a year off fully while we just thought, like, what should we do? And then years later, I mean, it's coming up to 11 years now. It's a long time. We've gone through various different, sounds and working with lots of different artists. And it's been an amazing experience, really.
So the lesson in that is hustle, basically. Respect the hustle. And you're working on a new label project currently. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, so sure. It's called MTD, which stands for Make the Difference. We're actually going to listen to a track a bit later on, which is by the same name. But the idea of the label is actually taking stuff from my back catalogue of tracks of mine that I've made, and then getting people that I really, really love and respect their work to rework and make the difference, remix the tracks. I've kind of given it away there, but the idea really is not to say what the tracks are, but we say who the artist is. So this one's Silver Lining, who is just a complete legend in my mind, amazing producer. And what he's done with these tracks is just like, I had like a complete religious experience when I heard this bass line he did on the, now I'll fully give it away. So with the other tracks, Wasted, which is another one from my thing, but yeah, amazing work. But it's so yeah. Long and the short of it, the idea is stuff from my back catalogue. So I've released some music for 10 years. I've got a lot of music, and some of it I would love to hear a fresh take on, a fresh perspective. So the first record's out in I think May or June, depending on delays and everything else that's going on in the world. So yeah, keep an eye out for it.
Wicked, I can't wait to hear it. Let's talk about the moment which every, I guess, DJ and producer has, where you go, do you know what? this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and I don't care what it takes to do it, but this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Do you remember that moment? Was there something that brought that on, that epiphany, that light bulb moment for you?
100%. I can tell you exactly where and what time. I was in Fabric, room 1. It was like 6, 7 in the morning when Fabric used to stay open a bit later. I'm going to assume it was Craig Richards playing because it was 7 a.m. and it was like the end, and I guess he would have been closing. But it was, I was on the dance floor and Octave 1 Blackwater came on. And I just had this, like, I'd never felt that way before. And I just remember thinking, what else would I possibly want to do? Like, what else there's nothing else for me out there, so this is it. And you're looking at your watch going, like, please don't finish now, please don't finish now. That must have been about 2009 or 10. But yeah, totally mind-blowing experience. And then I guess down the line, when it was a point where I was like, right, well, things are actually happening here, and this is a possibility, because you spend time playing gigs on the weekend and enjoying it and having fun, but it's very difficult to think like I could make a career of this, because obviously you've got your bills to pay and your rent and blah blah blah. I don't think there was ever a moment where I thought now's the time. I just thought, well, in fact I know what it was. My boss basically said, look, I know, like, you can't, whatever you're doing on the weekend has got to stop, because you're a complete nightmare during the week. Like Monday, Tuesday, you might as well not be here. So so basically, that was what took me to go, right, well, it wasn't a case of it's going so well, I can quit my job. It was like, I've got to quit my job because my boss wants me to stop DJing. So, there's your answer.
So you weighed it up and thought, you know what, it's just not worth doing the job anymore.
I thought about it over the weekend. I called my mum. My mum was like, quit the job, you hate the job, you love music. And that was it, yeah. Well, I moved home and I spent I think I quit my job when I was 26, 27. I lived home for like 3 or 4 years, and gradually got into a position where I could support myself. But it was scary. It's a big leap.
Props to your mum for being a supporter in all that as well, because that's not a common dynamic that happens a lot when you're young and you want to do this as a job. So Archie, you're someone who collaborates a lot. You work with a lot of different artists. We've just been speaking about the Make the Difference project, which is a perfect example of that. But dead or alive, who is your dream collaborator?
I'd love to work with like an amazing keys player. So I think someone like Herbie Hancock would be amazing. Just someone who can give like some flair to what I'm doing, and also just watch and see, like, I don't know, there's always things that I wish I could do if I just had that extra ability, So a keys genius.
Wicked, good answer. I like that one. I do a bit of keys myself, not very well anymore. Great answer. All right, we can't avoid it. We've got to talk about the pandemic because it's something that's very present in all of our lives at the moment. But I want to talk about the positives of the pandemic and good changes that you've made coming out of this, and maybe things that you've been able to focus on that you wouldn't have had the time to do had it not been for this massive pause on life and on live shows at the moment. So for you, what are the positives you've drawn out of this situation, and has it enabled you to be more productive in terms of making music?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the pause has given me real perspective on what's happened, certainly in my life and my career over the last 2 or 3 years, given me a moment to be really seriously appreciative of like what's happened. Looking back and going like, I can't believe I played at that club, or I can't believe that, so-and-so played that track or stuff like that. So it's given me that breathing space to go like, wow, okay, a little bit of time to then reset my objectives and look at where I want to go and what I want to be, what kind of artist I want to be, and all that type of stuff. It's given me the chance to really focus on the labels as well, which is really nice, because when you're constantly traveling, it's just so difficult to give your focus on so many different projects. The main thing is productivity, for sure, has gone through the roof. My sound, it's made my sound change a little bit as well, because let's say in any given month when you're touring, you've got 4 or 5 days a month that you can fully focus, where you're not knackered and you don't have a million and one other life admin things that you've got to do. So let's say that's 1 or 2 days a week, right? Now I've got 30 days and no excuses a month. So it enables you to test yourself, to try new things. That's the main thing, trying new things, not being afraid to go, I've got to finish a track for my next gig, or I've got to finish this track for that EP and I've only got 4 days to do it. You can go, I've never worked out how to, you know, make that type of hat loop or that type of distortion or whatever. So you've got time, and that just enables you to really try new things. And in that's changed my sound, which is great because I'm really excited about the new music I've done and that is now coming out. It's enabled me to have times to have conversations with other artists and collaborate and work, because I've had tracks with a couple of vocals in the past, and I've just started working with some other vocalists to do some more sort of song type music rather than just clubby stuff, which is wicked. So yeah, productivity through the roof, and then also being present at home and having time in my relationship where I haven't had this much time, and it's been amazing for us. It's been we've got closer than we've ever been. So yeah, I mean, tons of positives, but I'm definitely looking forward to starting to tour again.
Yeah, I feel like when we're talking about relationships, loads of my friends have either broken up or had a baby.
Make or break, right? Or had a baby.
Yeah, so many births, so many babies, or divorces and breakups, which is tragic. But also, there's silver linings to that, and weighing up all your life and getting your ducks in a row.
I heard a really good analogy about it. It's like when the tide goes out in the harbour, and you can see all the bicycles and the shopping trolleys at the bottom and all the disgusting stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's like. Yeah. I feel you on that one. Let's talk about your tracks. You've brought 2 tracks for us today. And the first one is one of your tracks, and the second one is a track that means a lot to you. And you know what's funny? We've actually mentioned both of them already. So the first one, tell us what it is, firstly. It's a track of mine called Make the Difference, which features a vocal from a New York house legend, Mr. V.
Feel that? It's that feeling of change. Don't that feel good? Man, it feels so good. Feels like I got a giant weight off my shoulders. Well, I don't feel like I gotta be like everybody else, because everybody here is different.
The track was originally called Glare, and I wrote it as a sort of just a clubby, tooly rhythm track. And it was around the time when I was writing my album in about 2019. And I wrote Glare as a sort of rhythm track to be. The idea of the album was it was a whole mixed thing, like an hour of continuous play, and it was a flow. It wasn't track that stopped and a new track started. And so I wrote some sort of segue tracks that would go from one area of energy to another. And I played it out a few times, the rhythm track, and it went off. And basically, I was thinking, right, what kind of features would I have on the album? And so I was sat on a train, and I was basically going to visit my godson in Pinner, miles away outside London. And I thought, you know what? And I was listening to Mr. V, Just Dance, baby. And I was like, moonshot, but I'll just give it a go, because I've never spoken to the guy. I'll just give it a go. So I found his email, and I fired him an email, and then I went down on the tube, and I came up about 40 minutes later, and I had an answer. And he was like, yeah, I'd love to, brilliant. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so he said, is there anything you want to write about? And I was like, well, not really, just go for your life, sort of thing, because, just see how the track, see where the track takes you. And he basically, just sent it in one take, and I loved it from the off. I made some slight edits, changed some things around, but it's interesting because it was a real lesson for me in space and dynamics in a track. The original version has more of a prominent 303 acid line, and I if anyone who knows my music will know that pretty much every single one of my tracks has an acid line in it, because I'm obsessed with that sound. And so when he delivered the vocal, it took a bit of like rejigging and moving stuff around. The acid line then had to sit a bit further back in the mix or be quieter in the mix, so the vocal could be more prominent. So it's just quite an interesting exercise in like almost dismantling the thing, putting it back together, but not changing the structure, but just changing the dynamic of it. And so I still play both versions, and they have a different effect, but there's obviously, there's so many of the same elements. It was the first time that I'd sort of worked with a proper vocal that wasn't a sample, like with a serious vocalist. So it was a big sort of learning experience, and I'm really, really happy with the result in the end.
Wicked. When you're making a tune, right, this is a question I've always wondered. When's the point where you're like, okay, it's done? Because if I know musicians, I know that they're perfectionists. And for me, I reckon making that cut-off point and exporting a track and going, yeah, that's done. Where's the moment where you're like, okay, done, ready?
When there's a deadline.
Okay, that makes sense.
Every time you play it in a club on a different system, you'll go, that's too loud, or that's too quiet, or that's annoying, or... and you'll be on like version V8, like version 8 or 9 or 10. It's literally when it's crunch time, they're like, okay, mate, it's either we're doing this or we're not. So you have to give it in. I think also, when you've played it, you get a great reaction. There's no when you're playing it out, and there's no moments during the track where you think, oh, this has got boring. Once it's like you play it in a club and you're like, maybe that's the answer to the question. When it's a go-to track, when you're in a club and you're like, I'll play that now and I know that's going to go off. But yeah, maybe, but otherwise it's deadlines.
That makes logical sense.
Yeah.
When you have got to that point, what's your testing ground like? What does that look like? Is there anyone who's your go-to person for feedback? Do you play it out before you release it? So
I generally send it to people that sort of opinions that I trust. So my manager Matt Tolfree, my Roscoe, my cousin who I share the studio with. I mean, different people, sort of different times, because also I'll know, because I make quite a varied variety. It's quite a variety of styles of music, and so I know that if I send it one style to one person who's into that sound, I'll get an answer that I need. And then once a few people have said like that's good or that's absolute rubbish, then it's club testing time, and I've got so much music that needs club testing over this year that I haven't been able to. Then it's club testing time, and I think what you're really looking for is periods where it, you think, oh, it's getting a bit loopy here, or it's got a bit boring, and then also it's the mix. It's like certain things in the studio will sound fine. Generally, what happens with mine, and I can't nail it, is I'm always too bassy. My bass is always too loud. And when I play it next to something else, it's like, so generally I have to pull myself back on that even before I get to the club. And then that's what generally takes the most tweaking. But yeah, that's kind of the process.
Do you still get nervous before you put a tune out?
I do, yeah. I care a lot. Yeah. I spend way too much time on YouTube looking at people's comments to see what they think of it. I wish I didn't, but I do. I'm looking, because I want to make sure I'm doing, what people are enjoying. I mean, to a certain extent, I do what I do, and maybe that's why I'm looking, because I do what I do. Sometimes it's more kind of received as kind of cooler stuff, or maybe a little bit more accessible. But yeah, I like to kind of keep a bit of a temperature of what people are kind of, if they like it, And also it's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling seeing people write amazing stuff. You see some amazing comments of people saying like, this mix has changed my life, or this really helped me through some dark times. That is like the best feedback you can ever have. Knowing that you're actually genuinely touching somebody, and because that's really the goal, isn't it? It's like, you want people to feel how you feel when you listen to music, which is transportative and completely, especially in these times, makes you forget about all the horrendous stuff that's going on outside. And so, yeah, that's the sort of long answer to that one.
What about this particular track? What was it like when you first played this one out? Do you remember the reaction that you got?
Yeah, absolutely. So I played the rhythm track Glare at Brett in Amsterdam, and I pretty much wrote the track. In fact, no, I did write the track for that club, because I remember I was like, right, I've got Brett coming up in 2 weeks. It's like one of my favourite clubs in the world to play, and I need something that's going to be like super hot that no one else has got. So I made that, and it was just like, had exactly the response I wanted. And then the vocal version, I couldn't actually tell you where the first place I played it was. I literally rinsed it everywhere, and it had such a great reaction. And also the really great thing was seeing other DJs play it, because no one else has Glare, the rhythm track. But I think I saw Marco Carola play it at Music On Festival maybe, and then I think Carl Cox played it somewhere. And not that I was there, I saw it on like streams and on people's camera phones, but like that is such a amazing feeling of what's the word, like reassurance to know that, like, yeah, it's a nice piece of work.
Nice. And that's that one. So your second track is a track that means a lot to you. Tell us what you've chosen.
It's Octave 1, Blackwater, with amazing vocal from Anne Saunderson. And that is the track that made me want to do what I do now. It's just everything about it is, for me, is just it has that totally transportative X factor, right? The intro has got, you know, if you know it, it just starts with the rolling congas, and then this like thumping kick drum and the bass line, which is like a sort of, it's like, I think they've layered two sounds there, because you've got the subby sound and then like a do 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 that sits on top of it, and it just cuts through so well, and the vocal is like, it makes me well up quite regularly when I listen to it.
Well, this is the 7 a.m. Fabric experience, right? Where you were like, I'm going to quit my job and do this now.
So the last time I played it was at the Fuse birthday in 93 Feet East, and I think there might have been a couple of people on the dance floor who had the same experience as I did in Fabric way back when. Amazing. Tears, laughter, hugs, the lot.
Is there a particular part of the track that's your favourite, that you're waiting for?
The chorus I love, but there's one bit where it's quite strong, and then it goes into this refrain. I'm not going to try and sing it, but she says, "Close the door," and the energy drops down, and then this little violin part comes afterwards, and that just like, it's such an amazing show of dynamic with the arrangement, where it's like strong and then it just drops and it sort of pulls you forward and pushes you back, sort of thing. Yeah.
And aside from your first experience with this tune, which you told us about earlier, 7 a.m. in Fabric, making you want to do this for the rest of your life, when you play it now, what are those moments when you're playing it? Is this like your go-to sad tune? Is this your cheer you up tune? Is it a motivational one?
I don't get that many opportunities to play it. The last time I played it was at 93 Feet East at the Fuse 10th birthday, and I was playing back to back with Roscoe, and actually we played for a long time, played for like 4 hours, and I spent like the first 3 hours going, Ross, I'm going to play Blackwater, Ross, I'm going to play Blackwater, and he was going, no, don't, it's too obvious. I was like, Ross, and then eventually I was like, right, I'm just going to do it. And I did it, and it just like, yeah, it had an amazing effect on the energy of the room, just went. But yeah, it's also another one of those things where and I sort of turned around, I was like, ha, like, you know.
Stick to your guns, there you go. And do you feel like this has influenced your own sound and your own production?
Definitely. I mean, as much as I have acid lines in my tracks, I always have Latin style percussion, you know, conga and bongo drums. So there's a lot of influence in there from me as well. I'd love to work on a vocal like that. You could actually draw a fairly reasonable comparison to Glare and to the bass and the drums of Blackwater. Like the patterns and the sort of sonics of it are not dissimilar. I mean, I'm not saying by any stretch of the water that it's up there, but you know, definitely an influence.
Wicked. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been Emerald. That's been Archie Hamilton. Where can people find you if they want to find you on socials? Yes,
Instagram is at Archie B Hamilton, and I guess everything else is Spotify, SoundCloud, all that. Just Archie Hamilton Music. You'll find me.
Wicked. This has been Beat by Beat with Armani Exchange, and we'll see you for episode 2.